Sometimes life doesn't change in a year or a month or even a day. Sometimes the axis of your entire world tilts in the space of a single ordinary minute. In my case, it was the 20 seconds an elevator took to travel from the serene lobby of the Wellington Residences to my apartment on the 7th floor. The day had been unremarkable. The sun was a pale, wintry gold, and my thoughts were filled with the simple, comforting rituals of a grandmother Sunday. I was thinking of my granddaughter's laugh and the pot roast I would slowly braise for dinner, its aroma promised to fill my cozy apartment. My arms were heavy with grocery bags, each one a small anchor to a normal, predictable life. The elevator doors sighed open on the 4th floor. I stepped into the familiar mirrored box, my reflection a portrait of gentle routine. I pressed the button for the 7th floor, listening to the soft hum of machinery as it began its ascent. Everything was as it should be, almost boringly so. Then it stopped on the 4th floor. The doors slid apart, and there stood my neighbor, Robert Hayes, a quiet man in his 50s with a soft voice and kind eyes that usually met mine with a polite, "Good afternoon, Miss Bennet." But that afternoon was different. He didn't look at me. His breath came in short, ragged pulls, as if he'd been running. His hands, I noticed, trembled slightly at his sides. A cold thread of unease slipped down my spine. As the doors began to close, sealing us in this moving chamber together, he moved with a sudden, desperate grace. His fingers brushed against mine, and into my palm he slipped a small square of paper, folded tightly into quarters. The touch was fleeting, but the panic in it was unmistakable. I looked up, my mouth opening to form a question. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" But he gave the faintest shake of his head. His lips moved, forming a silent, urgent command I read more than heard. "Don't say anything." The elevator continued its climb. The hum seemed louder now, a drone that filled the sudden thick silence between us. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the note. 4 simple words, scribbled in rushed blue ink, stared back at me. "Fake sick and get out of here fast." My mind stalled. My first absurd impulse was to laugh. A joke? A bizarre prank from a man I barely knew? But then I looked at his face. It was pale, drawn tight with a tension that spoke of immediate, palpable danger. It was the face of a man who could see the precipice and knew we were both standing far too close. My heart, a moment ago so steady, began to hammer against my ribs. Logic warred with instinct. I knew nothing, yet something deep and primal within me screamed one clear directive: trust him. And so I did. I clutched a hand to my chest, letting the grocery bag slump at my feet. A soft, ragged moan escaped my lips. "Oh, dear God," I mumbled, swaying on my feet, allowing my body to slump against the cool metal wall. I don't feel well at all." Robert's reaction was instantaneous. He lunged forward and slammed the red emergency button. A jarring alarm blared and the elevator shuddered to a halt, suspended between floors in a sudden, eerie silence. With a grunt of effort, he wedged his fingers in the seam of the doors and pried them apart, just wide enough for a person to slip through. The dim light of the concrete shaft beyond was a stark contrast to the elevator's fluorescence. "Get out, Miss Bennet," he whispered, his voice firm, final. "Now." I didn't hesitate. I scrambled through the narrow opening, my feet finding the solid, dusty ledge of the 4th floor hallway. My grocery bags tumbled out after me, cans rolling quietly across the carpet. I turned, leaning heavily against the wall, breathless and trembling. He stayed inside, holding the doors open with sheer will. For one last, eternal second, our eyes met, and in his gaze I saw it all. The fear, yes, but also a fierce determination and a profound, heartbreaking sadness. This was no game. This was a farewell. He gave a final, almost imperceptible nod. Then he released the doors. They slid shut with a soft, definitive thud, closing him inside with whatever fate he was trying to spare me. The elevator, with Robert alone in it, began to move again, continuing its journey upward, taking him away from me forever. I remained there, pressed against the wall, trying to make sense of the impossible. The ordinary hallway, with its generic landscape painting and faint smell of lemon cleaner, now felt like a stage after a terrifying play. Minutes later, the distant sound of sirens began to weave through the air outside. Not one, but many. They grew louder, converging on our building, their wails climbing the brick and glass facade like spectral vines. From my apartment window, I watched police cruisers and an ambulance slide into the parking garage below, their lights painting the afternoon in frantic strokes of red and blue. The building awoke with a nervous energy. Doors opened down hallways, concerned voices murmured. Someone shouted that the elevator was stuck. Another voice, shrill with panic, said there was blood. My legs felt like water. I wanted to go downstairs, to see, to help, but I couldn't move. I sank into an armchair, the note from Robert crumpled in my damp hand. What had he been trying to prevent? What did he know that I didn't? A firm knock echoed at my door. A police officer, his face grave, stood in the hallway. "Miss Clara Bennett?" "Yes, officer. What's going on?" "We're speaking to all the residents. Did you know the man who was found in the elevator, a Robert Hayes?" My heart turned to ice. "Found? Is he—" The officer's gaze softened just for a moment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He was deceased when paramedics arrived. It appears he was attacked." The word deceased hung in the air, cold and absolute. I had just seen him. I had just felt the warmth of his hand. The world seemed to tilt again. That night, sleep was a distant country. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his look, that final, silent communication. He had traded his chance for mine. I turned on my bedside lamp, its glow a small island in the dark, and unfolded the note again. The paper was slightly stained. From his sweat or mine, I couldn't tell. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I turned it over, and there, on the back, in the same faint blue ink, was a second message I had missed in my panic. "Don't trust anyone in the building." A shiver, cold and deep, traced the length of my spine. How was that possible? I had lived in the Wellington for over 30 years. I knew everyone. Margaret on the 5th floor, who was always borrowing sugar. The Carter brothers on 3, whose friendly debates were a familiar soundtrack. My own son, Daniel, and his wife, Elise, living just 1 floor above me on the 8th floor. This was my world, my community. And then I remembered. Elise, my daughter-in-law. The same Elise I'd argued with just a week ago, a tense, sharp conversation about my late husband's inheritance, about family land she was desperate to sell and I was determined to keep, a dispute that had left a chill in the air between us. The police returned the next morning with more questions. Why would Robert Hayes give me that note? I offered weak possibilities. Maybe he was confused. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. But the words felt hollow. He knew exactly who I was. After they left, the silence in my apartment became a living thing, heavy and watchful. The elevator was still sealed off, a silent tomb in the heart of the building. I made a decision then, sitting alone in my sunlit living room. I would not be a passive victim in this story. Robert had tried to save me for a reason. If that reason was hidden within these very walls, within the smiles of people I thought I knew, then I would find it. I would listen to the new, fearful rhythm of the building, and I would uncover the truth. The next days were painted in shades of silence and whispered conversations. The building itself seemed to hold its breath. Doors that once stood open now closed quickly. Curtains twitched shut as I passed. The elevator lobby, once a place of casual chatter, was now an avoided void. I felt eyes on me, subtle, lingering glances in the mailroom, on the staircase. Some neighbors offered strained, overly bright smiles. Others simply looked away. It was as if a secret was circulating through the vents, and I was the only one not privy to it. The lead detective, a man with a weary face that had seen too many lies, listened intently as I recounted everything. Robert's fear, the note, the desperate escape. "And you say you didn't know him well?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Just to say hello." "Interesting," he murmured, flipping through a small notebook. "Because we found your name written on a sheet of paper in his apartment. Clara Bennett, 7th floor. It was listed next to 2 other names, though the others were crossed out." The air left my lungs. My name, written in the home of a dead man who had saved my life? "Do you know if Mr. Hayes had any enemies?" the detective pressed. "No," I said, quietly, the truth dawning with a terrible clarity. "But it appears that I do." The fear solidified that night. At 2 a.m., the ancient floorboard outside my apartment creaked under a careful weight. I slipped out of bed, my heart a frantic drum, and pressed my ear to the cool wood of the door. Someone was out there, breathing. Then a faint rustle. A slim white envelope slid silently across the threshold and came to rest on my foyer floor. I waited an eternity before retrieving it. No return address. Inside, I found 2 things: a yellowed newspaper clipping about the unsolved murder of a businessman tangled in a financial scandal, and a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was hurried, anonymous. "It all started with your husband's inheritance. Don't trust anyone." My husband, James? He had been gone for 6 years, a loss I had learned to carry like a smooth stone in my pocket. The inheritance, the land, the investments, had been the source of that bitter argument with Elise. She had wanted to liquidate, to move the money. I had refused, wanting to preserve what James built. The dispute had driven a wedge deep into our family. What did James have to do with this? With Robert? With a dead accountant and a newspaper? The next morning, the building lobby was abuzz with a new grim piece of gossip. Margaret from the 5th floor intercepted me, her eyes wide with morbid curiosity. "Clara, did you hear? They say the man in the elevator was an accountant and that he worked for someone here in the building." My blood ran cold. "Who?" "A woman on the 8th floor," Margaret whispered, savoring the drama. "Elise Bennett, isn't that your daughter-in-law?" I managed a nod, my throat too tight for words. The 8th floor, my family. Armed with more questions than courage, I went upstairs. Daniel answered, surprise and weariness mingling on his face. "Mom, what a surprise!" Elise appeared behind him, impeccably dressed, a cold, polished smile on her lips. "To what do we owe the visit, mother-in-law?" "I was just thinking about the elevator," I said, choosing my words like steps on thin ice. "Such a terrible thing." "Wasn't it just?" Elise replied, her voice a perfect mimicry of concern. "A terrible tragedy. That man, he actually did some minor accounting work for me. Small things, nothing important." She said it while examining a perfectly manicured nail, avoiding my eyes. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, please, not this again." "I'm only asking, son." Elisa's smile didn't waver. "Honestly, that man had his own enemies. I'm not surprised it ended the way it did." There was an uncertain certainty in her tone, a chilling finality. I left quickly, my mind reeling. That night, I did something I hadn't done since James's death. I entered his old study. The air was still thick with his memory, old paper, faint cedar, and silence. In his desk, buried beneath files of a life once lived, I found a folder, and in that folder, a single sheet with a name underlined, Robert Hayes, and in the margin, in my husband's familiar strong script, a message meant for me. "Tell Robert if something happens to me." The room spun. Robert knew James. He had been looking out for me on my own husband's orders, a protector appointed from beyond the grave. And Elise? What was her role in this web my husband had seen forming? The pieces were there, scattered and sharp, but I couldn't yet see the picture they formed. I only knew that the threat Robert had warned me about was not a stranger lurking in shadows. It was woven into the very fabric of my life, into the family dinners and the shared walls, into the smile of the woman who had mewed my son. And the most terrifying suspicion of all began to take root, that sometimes the danger doesn't come from the darkness outside. It comes from the people we light our homes for. And as I sat in the deepening quiet of my apartment, the safe, familiar world I knew was gone, replaced by a puzzle where every piece was a betrayal, and the only clue I had was a note from a dead man and a warning whispered in a trembling hand. The mystery deepens, like shadows lengthening at dusk, but for now, let that thought drift away. Let the image of the note, the quiet elevator, the concerned face of a neighbor, let them all soften and blur at the edges. The questions are there, but they can wait for tomorrow. For now, there is only the gentle weight of the story, the comfort of the narrative, carrying you into a place of rest. The building is quiet now. The hallways are still. The elevator rests between floors, holding its secret close. And in the safe cocoon of your own room, you can let the tension of Clara's world fade away and replace it with your own peaceful darkness, feeling your breath deepen, your muscles relax, as the story whispers you towards sleep. There is more to uncover, more truths to be found in the silence of the building, but that is a journey for another night. For now, simply listen to my voice, a steady presence in the quiet, guiding you down, deeper and deeper, into calm, into stillness, into a deep and restorative sleep. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the story wrap around you like a soft blanket. And as you drift, know that you are safe and all is well. Good night.